Welcome to the Friendly Podcast Guide, sorting through podcasts so you don't have to. I'm Andy Smiley, and I want to help you discover the right podcast without having to listen to an entire episode. Now, let's talk podcasts. Hello! This week we are talking about Missing Pages, which dives into the sometimes murky water of the publishing world. Before I heard of this podcast, I hadn't given much thought to how my favorite books got into my hands. But my eyes have been opened to the crazy stuff that can happen in the publishing business. Before we dive into my literary conversation with Bethanne Patrick, the host of Missing Pages, here are some details about the show. The show is described as an all-new investigative podcast hosted by world-renowned literary critic and publishing insider Bethanne Patrick. Across its 8-episode debut season, Missing Pages uncovers the power struggles, mistaken identities, and unfathomably bad behavior within the secretive world of book publishing. Each episode brings in authors, experts, publishing insiders, and a circus of New York City media elites to tell the real story. Unfit for print. The length of each episode is about an hour, and it is a short series with hopes for a second season. We're putting those vibes into the universe for Bethanne. You can get additional content if you subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Before we learn more about the vibe of the show, we're going to take a quick break to talk about my free guide to find podcasts you'll love. I hope you're excited about Missing Pages, but if you're not sure if it's a good fit for you, I have a guide that can help you find a podcast you will love. The guide has 9 different types of podcasts like history, parenting, and health and wellness, and under each type of podcast, there are links to 3 different shows. That is 27 different podcasts for you to choose from. If you try a couple and you don't like any of them, I put my email at the bottom of the guide so you can email me and I will personally help you find a podcast you will love. Now we get to hear from Bethanne as she talks about her love of podcasts, but the worry she had about starting her own. Today we have Bethanne Patrick from the Missing Pages podcast. Bethanne, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I cannot wait to talk about this awesome podcast.
Thank you, Andy. I am delighted to be here.
Fabulous. So first of all, can you introduce yourself a little bit to my listeners?
Absolutely. My name is Bethanne Patrick, and I am a writer, a critic, and an author. I do a lot of book reviews. That's probably what I'm best known for. And on Twitter, I am at the Book Maven. On Instagram, at Dear Book Maven. And that's because I have been working in the publishing industry with and around books and, all about books, basically, for about 20 years now, a little over 20 years.
That's awesome. Well, then that's like perfect for your podcast. So why did you start your podcast?
Well, people have been saying to me for years, you should start a podcast because, of course, as you know, Andy, podcasts rule.
Yes, they do.
I didn't want to do one all on my own for many reasons. One of the reasons was because I wasn't sure I was ready to actually do something sustained and, get something done every week. There's a lot of pressure in podcast content. So I delayed and delayed. But last year, when the Podglomerate decided to start its very first from the ground up podcast, they came to me because the CEO, Jeff Umbro, who's our executive producer, had not only seen my work out there as a book critic, but also had heard my voice and thought, this works. Let's try this. Let's
That's
put
awesome.
on a show. Yeah, it is really awesome. And I was so delighted because that meant that I would have a team working with me. And I would be collaborating, but also getting support, and things I don't know would be taken care of and vice versa. And it's just been a really terrific process. And I hope that has led to a really terrific podcast.
Yeah, seriously. Well, I feel like what I have heard, I'm not going to lie, I have not listened to all of the episodes, but the ones that I've listened to are fabulous.
Thank you.
I really like the production quality. It just feels really like riveting. So I like it.
Oh, that is great to hear. And and it is Missing Pages is about what we're calling cold cases in the publishing world. And these, of course, aren't actually murders. These are not cold cases. What they are examples of scams and scandals and fiascos and bad behavior. And we're looking at them in terms not just of what actually happened and who did what, but also to say, what might need to change so that something like this doesn't happen again? What could we change in book publishing to make things more diverse, more equitable?
Definitely. Okay, you just kind of touched on it, but I want to dive deeper into what you want people to get out of missing pages.
Well, I want them, of course, to have a lot of fun. And I also want them to learn about these stories that they might have heard maybe in a news article. Somewhere in the back of their head, they remember, oh, this guy or this woman did that. And they don't really remember, they don't really know the story. So I want them to feel as if we are getting the facts right. And I just want to say, I'm telling everyone this, we do have fact checking on each episode and legal review on each episode. So I hope that listeners will be entertained and informed and maybe have their minds changed, or not changed necessarily. Maybe they'll ask some questions that they are interested in learning more about.
Definitely. I love that. Well, and I love what you said about having like a team of people to help you. I feel like that just makes such a good podcast, doesn't it? When you're able to bring what you are bringing, but then also have people backing you up to make sure you're saying the right thing. You know what I mean? Or at least like come in and be like, hey, let's fix this a little bit, or let's make sure this podcast is where it needs to be. I am mostly a one girl show, but my fabulous brother-in-law, he is like my website guy, because I was like, this is too much. Like I literally cannot put this on my brain. So thank you, Ryan.
Exactly.
He's my guy.
We all need someone to work with us. So that's really important. Yeah. And I'm sure there are people I'm forgetting to mention. And I just love working with them. And as I said, the Podglomerate is fantastic when it comes to other parts of the podcast process. That's what they've been doing for several years now. But this is the first show that they've developed. And I think we can all be really proud of it.
Definitely. I completely agree. Okay, so we kind of touched on the vibe of the show, talking about kind of like cold cases and publishing, but can you dive a little deeper into what the vibe of the show is?
Well, I think we can definitely say that the vibe of the show is dishy and gossipy because it just... it comes naturally to me. It's because I'm so interested in everything that's going on around me. And that includes these stories. Why would someone lie about having an advanced degree? Why would someone get involved in a situation where they're accused of plagiarism? Sometimes these things happen. You just don't know what's happening. Sometimes they're very carefully chosen, that people make decisions, to do things that aren't right or aren't on the up and up. And that's something that fascinates me. So the vibe is very dishy, but I hope it's also very fun and compassionate. I
love that.
That's one of the things I want to come through on each episode, is that we are not out there we're not judging these characters. We're trying to figure out what makes them tick.
Totally. On that note, do you have a favorite episode or a couple of episodes, and why?
This is really, I will tell you, especially now because it's up, I wasn't able to talk about it before. One of my favorites is a two-parter on Caroline Calloway. And Caroline Calloway is a 20-something, maybe almost 30-something now, Instagram influencer who gained a lot of notoriety because she both posted a lot of beautiful photos. She was going to Cambridge University in England, and she posted all these great photos. And then she was able to get a lot of followers. I'm not going to say anything more, but that led to a book deal. for a book, this is not a spoiler, that she never wrote. And there's more around that, believe me, in this 2-part. It is a crazy story. And again, I want to say we tried, even though it's a nutty story and there's some things that happen that just seem so far-fetched and, odd choices. It's not about saying Caroline Calloway is bad or, she's not bad. She's not unintelligent. She's not unsuccessful. This is just a story that people need to know about because it tells you a lot about modern culture and the way it looks at young women and the way it looks at content created by those young women.
Definitely. So would you say that your podcast is okay for little ears? I just have a lot of mom listeners, so I like to ask that.
Probably not. I mean, there's not necessarily any, it's not a sweary podcast, but there's some content, especially there's some content that has to do with sexuality and, actions of people that moms probably wouldn't want their little ones listening to. I would say, definitely your, older kids, you're 12 years old and up, could probably listen to it. And you could probably talk about those things really well. Yeah,
totally. That would be like when they're older, you can be like, this was not a good thing that they did. Let's talk about why.
Exactly.
I love that. It's a teaching tool. You didn't think that you made a teaching tool, did you?
Missing Pages is a teaching tool.
I love it. Okay. Is there anything else that you want to add that we haven't touched on yet?
I think you will have a really great time listening. It's definitely different. It's definitely not like every other podcast out there. But if someone told me the other day that it was like a mashup of the TV show Younger and the TV show Only Murders in the Building.
Ooh.
Which I think is kind of fun.
That's a total compliment. That's awesome.
Thank you. I thought so too.
Well, I love it. Okay. And where can people find you and the podcast?
Missingpages.com, at Miss Pages Pod on Twitter, at Missing Pages Pod on Instagram. And you can find us anywhere you get your podcasts.
Okay, fabulous. I will make sure to link all of those in the show notes and your favorite 2-parter episode so that people can just jump right where they want to go. Thank you so much. It has been so much fun to get to know you and your fabulous podcast.
Thank you, Andy. Great to be here.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you know someone who could use missing pages in their life, will you share this episode with them? And if you want to learn about more podcasts that you'll enjoy, you can download my free guide to finding a podcast you'll love by clicking the link in the show notes. Talk to you soon.